So the first one is finding your niche, how to stand out from the crowd. This kind of came very quickly on Friday afternoon when Mark decided he's going to move his whole life and couldn't do his presentation today. And it really gave me some interesting thoughts on how to present this information. Kind of went back, I hate to admit, but 31 years. When I was an emerging leader and my company at the time would recognize my angst in speaking in front of people, knew I knew the information, but you see this red person amongst all the white. I was the one that literally would stand up and stammer, and if I said it correctly, my whole face would turn red and I would get these hives, and I became the Haley hives, and how am I going to get rid of them? And so fortunately, they sent me to a Dale Carnegie sales class. It was a 14-week course where you had to read all the books and had conversations and one-on-one coaching and group peer mentorship. And I kind of went back and brushed all that information off, and I realized, wow, some of the lessons learned from way back then, I still use today. So one of the first ones was, he has a book, again, we're talking 50s, 60s, 70s, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And I used our handy dandy ChatGPT to give me the highlights from the book. And the ones that resonate with me still to today is the power of the smile and a name. What that means is, you know, a nice friendly face, go up and smile, use your name, make sure you get the person's name that you're talking to. Kind of the tricks of the trade is when you meet someone new, try to incorporate that person's name at least 3 times and have some sort of affiliation so that you can remember and you've engaged and you've kind of made an impression on that person. Avoid criticism and condemnation. For those who don't know me, if anyone's talking negative at a networking group or anything, I walk away. I stay away from those types of interactions, that type of negative energy, and it keeps my positivity moving forward. Number 3, I think, is something that I think helps me be memorable, and I'm really truly just a naturally curious person. So and become genuinely interested in others and what they have to say and what their opinions are. That will help make a good impression. Make others feel important. Make sure they feel valued. Make sure they what they're saying, you're listening and that you're adding inputs to. Encourage others to talk about themselves. That's a great trick. It's like a positive, positive date to positive interaction. You realize that probably 80% of the time that customer was talking more than you are, and psychologically that is a good impression, and you will stand out in that regard. And seek to understand before being understood. And I put at the end here because we had this conversation last week because other coaches feel differently, but I do believe that you should admit your faults and mistakes when it happens. And that was one of the other bullet points from Dale Carnegie. Another book.
Repeat that, please, Katie.
Pardon?
Can you repeat that one?
Sure. Admit faults and mistakes.
Okay.
And
you mean I have them?
Sorry, Mark?
That's for the rest of us mortals, Mark, not for you.
Oh, okay, good.
So
just checking.
We actually found in the bowels of our basement one of the books here, The Quick and Easy Way to Effective Speaking. And again, great way of kind of brushing off old skills. There are really 4 voices that you can use when you are speaking to someone. You have the informative voice, where you're very straightforward and clear, and the goal is to educate and enlighten. You have the convincing voice, to make logical arguments. You provide examples, provide evidence to build a compelling case. That's where the past performance in my tagline kind of comes through. You have the entertaining voice. You have using humor and stories and anecdotes to captivate and make enjoyable. So it's a good time. And then the inspiring voice. This is where you motivate and uplift. You're sharing emotions, values, aspirations. You're making an empathetic connection with the people that you're talking to. So from the 14-week course, how to stand out, the first thing is self-reflection. Really understand who you are and where your strengths are. For clients, we do the MBA kind of SWOT analysis, the strengths, the weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. We do that from a company perspective, but we also do that from a personal perspective. Where do you excel? Where are your strengths? Where are your passions that you really like about your job? What if you don't know, or what you think about yourself, ask trusted colleagues. What skills and qualities do others recognize on you? Personal inventory can go a really long way in kind of crafting your way to be memorable. Track record of success. What strategies or approaches have consistently led to success, and how can you rinse and repeat? Passion and energy. What tasks or activities excite you? And that passion often indicates your areas of strengths. So, when I'm talking, we had this conversation before, when I'm talking AFCEA, when I'm talking Oasis Plus, some things that I really know and like and feel like I can get really deep in, you can see my energy and my passion kind of come through. When I talk about my kids, when I talk about art, those are the things where brings passion, energy, and just a natural inflection in my voice comes through, and it seems genuine because I'm genuinely interested. The biggest thing I think was the value alignment, though. Identify your core values and your principles, and are your strengths aligned with your values? We talk a lot today about corporate fit or a culture fit. I think this is where this comes along, that your values may not align with your corporate company values, and there's a disconnect. Or the message that your company or marketing or something has for the corporate, like corporate worldwide, is not quite aligning with your internal your internal values, and your genuine delivery is missed. So we're now right into the group discussion. So I want to ask the folks, does standing, in your opinion, does standing out begin with the individual or the corporate entity?
Hey, Katie, if I may, I think it really starts with the individual, as we go to different events, whether it's our LinkedIn presence or whatever it may be, they're all linked to you. They're not necessarily linked to your company. And if you start to stand out, then in my opinion, your company begins to stand out. That's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, and the conversely, Will, there's a lot of govies, and Susan, you're next. There are a lot of govies out there, the kind of worn CEOs. Like, do you know who's out there representing your brand? And who's out there at your trade show booths, who's out there talking on your behalf, and is that person really aligned with your corporate entity, your corporate alignment, etc. Susan.
Sorry, had to unmute. This is good stuff. I'm looking at this from 2 different lenses. One lens is finding my niche by myself. Where do I fit in the world? What is my professional development, dream, pursuit, goals, aspirations? And then there's the company finding its niche. And so I think there's a line in the sand between the two, especially with the current dynamics of our society, the way people are portraying themselves as look at me, look at me, look at me. We have a very social media focused society. And I think when it's on you to find where you fit, to find your niche. But when you're helping the company find its niche, you need to put away some of the things that pertain solely to you. And I think people a lot of times, especially when they're trying to burst into the marketing and the PR scene, they have trouble with that line in the sand. This is not about you. This is about the company, and we're finding our messaging and where we fit. And we have to be okay with saying, yeah, that might not be the right partnership relationship, or that might not be the right business relationship. Maybe we're not the vendor for you. So I'm thinking of two things to go with your library. I would add two. One of them definitely would be Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Yeah.
I think that helped me find the line in the sand between when it's about me and when it's about the company I'm serving. And let's face it, they're paying you a paycheck. So really you are serving the company. And then the other one that I would add to that, honestly, would be they ask, you answer. And it really does help the company find its voice, which once you identify that voice and that messaging, then it's easier to find your niche within different market segments. So I get you inspired that kind of direction.
Hey, Katie,
Yes,
Chris, it's just a couple of thoughts,
Yeah.
and we'll go whatever direction. I think there's a size of the organization component to this question, right? Because, for example, Storytech Consulting, that kind of has to start with me, right? I mean, a small organization, the leadership has to, you have to stand out. As you get to a larger and larger company, I think that the culture, the ethos of the organization either supports that sort of activity for individuals, or it puts brakes on in some way. And incredibly timely conversation with what's going on in the tech industry, right? I mean, headlines about, Google has fired more employees that took part in the demonstration. There are points on both sides, right? But, where does but that's my political belief, but where does that stop when you have a job, as Susan just said? And, policies and processes and so forth. The other thing is, a balancing act. I was listening to these great points, and personally, I don't want to be the guy who, you meet him and, hey, let me tell you all about my company and what I founded and what I do. But at the same time, per your comment about, showing some emotion, showing some passion, if you're not excited about what you do, and how you do it, why should anyone else be, right? So it's like so many other things in life, it's a balancing act. And really good thoughts and comments here. And then I guess one more thing, Myers-Briggs, I think a lot of us have probably gone through that, and there's a lot of arguments about that methodology and how relevant it was, but people can change, because I took it I first took that test long ago as part of a master's program at American, and according to it, you have 4 buckets, and I was here, and here. But then I took it much later after I had started my own company, and some of those findings had moved. So, put whatever credence you can into that, but you can work on these things. And I guess, Katie, here you are giving this presentation, so it's clear that you can work on things like being reluctant to speak in public and things like that. And then finally, people that say niche or people that say niche, the train will never meet. So
I like that. Well, and I'm going to go back to talking corporately. So even with a large company, Google, Microsoft, what have you, does standing out from the crowd start from the CEO down? Or does it become its own personality?
Again, I'm going to just chime in here and agree with Chris on his last comment, because we work with small, mid-tiers, and large businesses. And it seems like the smaller the business, the more the CEO's brand personality drives it. You know, so we've worked with companies that I would call the CEO, more more introverted, and not that he's not passionate or she's not passionate, but they just aren't, they're not like aggressive and sort of out there. And we have a smaller business that we're working with that, I'm listening to him, doing interviews with him, and this guy is all about, sort of power words. So now I'm reevaluating the tone of voice of our social media to mimic more of him, because he's kind of everywhere. So I think some of this is really, I do think it begins with with a CEO, but as you know, in those big companies, CEOs do change.
Mhm.
But in a small business, which most of our niches now, or niche, Chris, yeah, I'm finding it is, the brand and the tone of voice is definitely more CEO driven, because for internal communications, it is him or her, and that has to be consistent with the external communications. Otherwise, you've got, a brand culture war.
Yeah. That was Joyce, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Joyce. Yes. So Joyce, that kind of rolls into the next discussion topic. What voices do your company and clients utilize? We talked about the four: informative, convincing, entertaining, inspiring. And is it all in one form, or is there thought in, they say in order for a message to get absorbed, you have to say it 7 different ways in multiple different times, kind of putting it in 4 different ways. Do you take the same message and craft it in kind of the 4 groups that Dale Carnegie is talking about?
Yeah, Katie, I think from my perspective, number one, we could talk about this all day, half hour. I don't think I'll cut it for you, but your business needs to have that outward communication plan. Whether you're a one-man show or a $50 billion company, you have to have that strategic communications plan that will probably include all of these aspects. And then that's another way to kind of separate the individual from the company. If the company has a particular message and the individual is just reposting that message and not coming up with their own commentary per se, that's another good way for that company to stand out on the back of the person. But you really have to back it up to have that communication plan from the company to be able to drive what that voice is, what that vision is, and what inspires that company to be good at whatever they're good at, and be able to bring it to the population. But that's just me.
No, you're talking about leadership charisma. I mean,
Mhm.
where is the charisma applied? How does he or she galvanize? And how does that trickle down through the organization? Absolutely. And that will change when the CEO changes. If there's an M&A and, there's a culture change there, boy, does that change. How flexible is the new leadership? How do you communicate that down through the organization to keep them galvanized?
Yeah, there's a point, David Kriegman, he did the book 0 to a Million. That's the right title. And he was with SRA, and he was a CEO for them. And they said when they changed CEOs, the culture did change dramatically, and their values and their alignment had to be reworked. And so to your point, yes, I do think it starts from the top down, the CEO. It does change. And those are trying to do the same way with someone else's, with a new CEO and a new vision. I think that's where the issues may come into play. Okay, so my last question, do marketing and sales approaches align with individual strengths and passions? Meaning your sales materials, if for marketing folks, you create sales, you know, the capabilities matrix or their slide decks, or, you know, the conversations they have at trade shows and things, is there thought in who is being the deliverer of that message, and it aligns with their strengths?
I guess my opinion is that they often don't, that the company doesn't often align with the individual, right? We are human at the end of the day. But backing up to my previous comment, you know, that communication strategy from the company will direct me on what my values and passion should be when I'm public facing for the company.
Good point. Anyone else like to chime in there?
You know, when things like this come up, I think Daniel Pink. I've seen him a few times, and he talks about autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And if a job or a company gives you that, I'm thinking, you know, for the passion, I think believing that what your organization does has a higher purpose than you being successful is huge to the passion component. As far as individual strengths, what he meant by autonomy, mastery, and purpose, I think purpose is obvious. Autonomy is, am I trusted to do my job? Is someone always constantly looking over my shoulder? Do I have the autonomy to perform? And then mastery, is my mastery respected? And do I have a chance to continue to advance it? And if those three components are there, then I guess, obviously this question is slightly different, but you could argue that you're going to be able to work on your strengths and maximize them in the right organization for you. So
I know that's a really good point. Just what I was thinking when I wrote this group discussion question is, you know, we all have a tendency to deliver information. Mine is more from a passion perspective. Others are more comfortable in an informative perspective. You have the educative perspective and the entertaining perspective. Do not ask me to do a joke to start a group discussion. It's not going to work. So I was thinking, like, what, you know, I'm thinking trade shows and deliveries is the supporting marketing materials align with that person's particular delivery strengths.
I get that from our sales person here. I mean, in a sense, Katie, I'm kind of lucky because there's one
Yeah.
salesperson, there's one marketing person. If we're not a team, it's not going to work, right? It's just not going to work. And our boss, our mutual boss, the three of us, and then together with the senior solutions architect, who's wicked smart and incredibly passionate and very funny, the four of us kind of make a team, and it's the team voice we take forward. It's the team voice that we take public, right? And our chief commercial officer has a bead on the CEO who reports directly to him. So he's bringing the basic corporate vision, and then together we put the passion behind it. But if I'm not aligned with them, if we're not all kind of reading from the same sheet of music, we have to stop and breathe and go, okay, who's our audience? Who's speaking? What's our presence at this event? You know, what partnership are we going after? So we have to work together and be of the same voice to make it effective. And again, it goes back to that yes, you need your own individual strengths and passions, but it's about the company. So yeah, everybody brings that to the table. And what I like to tell people is that the ideal symbiosis of this team, the reason we're kind of harmonious, is the CCO brings the focus, because I can very easily fly out of focus with everything I have to get done. So the CCO brings the focus. The salesperson brings the positive. He's one of the most positive people I know, and can stop me from whipping into a froth by going, but you're doing a good job, and this really worked well, and it's so nice. And then our chief solutions architect, the fourth person in our team, he brings the passion. He gets you really excited about, and he teaches, because he's very technically savvy. If we're not aligned and bring our own individual strengths and identify them and call them out and appreciate them, we're not going to be doing something that best serves that event or that partnership or that investor presentation. So yeah, everybody needs to bring their different selves to the table. But again, it's that collective, what are we trying to achieve here?
Well, but it was all, what I'm hearing from you, Susan, too, is there is not just collaborative, but communication and a realization that personalities and strengths and how they all fit in the puzzle is, I won't say cerebral, but it is thought about for creating and building your team.
Absolutely. And when was the last time that you actually heard active listening being used?
Mm-hmm.
Somebody actually actively using active listening practices, because we all talk about how important it is, but it's very challenging on a daily basis to use that. And another book that comes to mind, that's very, very easy to read. It can get a little crunchy granola hippy dippy, but it's really, really easy to read, and it makes great points. And that's called The Four Agreements. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of that. I go back to that book all the time when I'm, spinning and I'm not taking those deep breaths, and I feel like maybe I haven't appreciated something that someone has said recently or something somebody brought to the table. I go back to The Four Agreements and I look at, where did I violate an agreement? And, how can I work on that? And those are some good individual strengths and passions focus. It really helps you tune into, I'm really good at these couple of agreements, but these I have so much trouble with, and I need to pay attention to that and bring that to the active listening table.
Oh, I think that's great. And
Chris Parente, let me interrupt a second. Chris Parente, will you take a snapshot of all of the attenders and get it to me, please?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Thanks.
and I
Sorry
do
to interrupt, Susan.
No problem. I do want to say for Janet's comment in the chat, one of my favorite books is Dare to Lead by Brene Brown as well. And that's a good one. So I have not heard of Four Agreements, Susan, and I will put that on my to-do list. Thank you. Okay, so we're close here. We're 1 minute over, but I want to just open it up for additional thoughts and comments.
I had to leap out for about 20 minutes because somebody wanted to give me money. It's a terrible thing. But it seems like a number of books were mentioned. Should we do another session on what are people reading and why?
That's a great question and suggestion, Mark. And Janet beat you to it. That is already on the list. I think it's in May. And
Of course she did.
and we can delve deeper into that at that time for sure.
And I think
Excellent.
it'd be great to categorize this. What are you reading for, like, personal development, professional development, and then recreation?
Yes.
Love it. I'll try to send out a poll.
You guys have time for recreation?
Very little, very little.
Well, I just want to thank everybody for your time. I kind of, because, again, this is more than 30 years old. Dale Carnegie is a considered a dinosaur, but I did go through this, And I said, you know, this information's still relevant. And I did it through my daughter, an emerging leader. And she goes, this stuff is really relevant. And we cross communicated and got her thoughts as well. So I hope you felt the same. And this isn't any new information. It's just bringing information back to the forefront. And it's like, have I kind of lost sight of how I'm unique? And if I embrace my uniqueness and my genuineness as I come through, that's how you're going to stand out in the crowd. And from a company, the kind of the same thing. How am I unique? How am I genuine? No one's really unique in the GovCon world, but how am I genuine? Is my thought. And how do you make that as a, I want to do business with you because you seem like a likable person. You seem like a responsible company. You seem like a tech savvy, responsible, etc. That's how you can stand out in the crowd.